I'm going to open this episode talking about the birding year. All of us have a way that we think about our year. A lot of us use a calendar year, spring, summer, winter, and fall, that sort of thing. Well, birders, we have our 4 seasons of the year too, and we often call them winter, spring, summer, and fall. But we think about them differently. We think about them by what birds are around, what's happening in terms of birding. So winter birding, winter season for birders, is not necessarily the same as winter for other people, although it's probably the season that most closely resembles the calendar season. Winter is the time when we see 2 primary types of birds. We see the birds who live here all year round. They don't go anywhere, so they're here in the winter just like every other time. We call those our resident species. And we have the birds that visit our area in the winter, breed somewhere else, and come here to spend the winter because it's a better place for them to be in the winter than where they breed. A lot of those birds breed north of here. You think of migration often in the northern hemisphere as being birds breed farther north and go farther south where it's not as cold to winter. Well, even though I live in Washington, I think of that as fairly far north for the United States. For the actual globe, it's not all that far north. It's fairly temperate. And a lot of Arctic birders and birders from north of here in Canada and Alaska come to our area for the winter. And in eastern Washington, that's also true, but they get different birds than we get here in western Washington, just like in the breeding season, the birds tend to be a little different. So winter birding in Washington is one of the more exciting times to be a birder. We get great winter visitors. The winter visitors we chase and look for the most are often raptors. We go for raptors in the Skagit Flats, the Samish Flats, and in the big open spaces in eastern Washington, as well as just around other parts of western Washington. But the Skagit Flats, Samish Flats are a famous raptor place. Big national tour companies bring their trips to our area for the winter. It's a great place to look for raptors. Sometimes we get up to 5 falcons in a day: gyrfalcon, prairie falcon, peregrine falcon, merlin, and American kestrel. One year we had a visiting Eurasian kestrel. We had 6 falcon days. It was crazy. But so we see raptors, we see rough-legged hawks, are a popular bird to look for in the winter. We also get visiting seed-eating birds from north of here. Things like common redpoll, red crossbills, white-winged crossbills on a good year, pine grosbeaks. We get birds that breed either at higher elevation or north of here that come to more accessible places to find in the winter. So winter birding is really good in Washington. And winter tends to be more or less winter. Starts in probably November-ish and goes through March or April. We have our winter visitors during that time. So it's a longer season than just a calendar winter, but is roughly correlates with what you think of as the winterish season. Spring migration is the second season of the year. Spring migration is a spread out period of time that for some species starts as early as February, but the peak of spring migration tends to be a pell-mell rush of birds that breed south of us and are traveling through, that winter south of us, that are traveling through to breed north of us. So they just kind of buzz on through in the spring. Typically that's mid-April to the end of May, general time frame, especially for shorebirds, which is what in Washington is one of the prime things we look for in spring migration. We have Grays Harbor and other areas that are terrific for spring migration shorebirds. We get a big congregation of shorebirds that come through. We also get an occasional unusual raptor in western Washington, like Swainson's hawk, and we have some songbirds that come through too. But primarily, shorebirds are our big thrill in spring migration in Washington, unlike eastern U.S., where passerine migration is a big thing. Along the whole Gulf Coast and much of the Atlantic coast and much of the Mississippi Flyway, seeing the warblers and buntings and tanagers and other passerines that come through, the colorful neotrophic migrants that winter south of us in Mexico and Central and South America and the Caribbean come whipping on through and stop over at some famous places: High Island, Cape May, Dauphin Island. There are all sorts of famous stopover places that can congregate large number of migrant passerines in the spring. So spring migration is a bigger deal probably in other parts of the country than it is for us here in Washington. But we have a terrific shorebird migration, and spring is always fun because, it's starting to get warm. It's nice to get out birding, and it's a great time. So spring migration is certainly one of the highlights of anybody's birding year. And then summer is when we look for the birds that breed in our area. The spring migrants have gone through, the fall migrants haven't started coming back through yet, and so we're looking for birds that breed around here. So summer breeders, or summer breeding season, is the third season. And that's a good time to look for common breeding birds, both residents and those that winter elsewhere and come to our area to breed. And it's always fun to do that, but it's really probably the slowest time of the year in terms of the birding season. Fortunately, spring migration can go up until the beginning of July, and fall migration can start at the later in July and the end of July. And so we only have a week or two between spring migration and fall migration. So the summer lull is not so bad. My guest today, Jason Fedora, talks about a competition he had put on in his county, or two adjacent counties, Benton and Franklin County, down where he lives near Tri-Cities. And they had a competition between the birders in the two counties to see who could find the most birds in July. The time of year when, at least in their counties, and I think really in many places, is the lax time of birding. Not that many people getting out, trying to add a little excitement to the summer birding season in his county. So that was fun, and we talk about that a little bit on the episode. The fourth season, of course, is fall migration. Fall migration is a terrific time for shorebird migration. We get a lot of vagrants show up here in the fall, both shorebirds and Asian birds that somehow just get over here, and passerines that breed in the boreal forests of Canada and north of us that usually go east and go down east of the Rocky Mountains on the migration, but some of them wander through eastern Washington and even western Washington, so we can get some vagrants. It's a great time to look for rarities, as well as fall migration for shorebirds can be really good. So our four seasons, just like the Peter, Paul, and Mary song, winter, spring, summer, and fall. All you got to do is look for the birds and be out there in the right place at the right season, and birding can be fun year-round.